This is a conversation with Paul Linden. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Serge.
As we were talking about doing this, recording this conversation, you suggested that instead of starting with general thoughts, you might actually start with a simple exercise.
Yes, that would give people an experience, and then we could have a foundation for discussion. If you would please, all of you who are listening, stand up and put a pencil on the floor, and then back up about 10 feet, 3 meters away from the pencil. Stand and look at the pencil. Oh, I forgot to tell you, it's a magic pencil. With this pencil, anything you write will come true. You could have a perfect sandwich or world peace or whatever you want. Want the pencil. Don't go get it. Don't not go get it. Just stand and experience the sense in your body of wanting the pencil. Does anything happen? Most people will experience a slight tipping toward the pencil as the mind and the muscles prepare to do the movement of getting it. That's what I define as intention, and it's the foundation for all the work I do.
Great. So we're going to talk about intention. And your background is in Aikido.
That you 46 years.
46 years of Aikido. And you describe that as a technology. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Okay. The technology is how we use our intelligence to do better than we're built for. We can fly higher than the birds, dive deeper than the fish, run faster than a cheetah, because we can move and do things that our intellect lets us do that we're not equipped for. Aikido is a nonviolent martial art. Hidden within it, and what I've tried to make explicit, is a process for not responding to attacks with fear or anger, but with calmness, respect, and kindness. It turns out if you fight with a sense of kindness in your body is free, your mind is free, you'll fight as well as you need to, but you won't want to. So it's both the cure for the desire to fight and for the inability to fight. That's kind of a strange thought for most people. But it's a technology. It allows us to deal with things. For example, you can hear my voice. I have Parkinson's. And I can steady myself and keep speaking, where without the technology, my voice would catch and I would be unable to speak.
So there's a lot in what you said. There's what is a technology? But I want to first go into the part where you mention a martial art, Aikido, that is nonviolent, and you mentioned this thing about fighting, but not to be in an antagonistic mode.
Right.
And you talk about finding calm. So could you elaborate a little bit on this?
Sure. The natural response to being challenged, threatened, hurt, or in any way feeling less than is to collapse or contract the posture, the breath, and the movement, and the attention. And that could be tightly contracting like anger or resignation and collapse, but it doesn't work well. If you want to learn to function in a calm, kind fashion, you need a steady stream of enemies to work with. Without the enemy, there's nothing to rouse the devil inside of us. With the enemy, with somebody who tries to punch me in class, in practice, I have the opportunity to monitor my body and change my natural reaction. It's in that sense that it's a technology, and it's a non-violent martial art, in the sense that we don't fight and wish to hurt. We have an operational way of finding kindness as a power source.
Yeah. So a sense of finding kindness, which is at the same time related to calm, as opposed to the more traditional way of fighting, which is also dysregulation. And so you are very much talking about regulation of the nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely. One way to think of it is we're doing sympathetic movements, emergency fight or flight movements, in a parasympathetic innervation state. That's got to confuse the brain and make us better than we started off.
So maybe we could relate this to something you say, that the root problem of a lot of things in the world is aggression. And yet you're using this martial art technology. So, how does
How would we do that? Well, it depends on practice. You know the Carnegie Hall joke? How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. What you have to do is find some activity, violin playing, tennis, something in which you're challenged and have difficulty. And then you get to see, when I'm challenged, what is my pattern? What do I do in my body? What I define as emotion is physiological events in the body. Feelings are what those physiological events feel like to the person who's doing it. So, what I'm doing is searching out in my body the capacity to replace aggression, the desire to diminish, the sense of being alienated, the other is not human. Searching out in my body a way that I can transform that natural response into one of inclusiveness and connection.
So, under aggression mode, what you're saying is it's all or nothing, it's me or you, there's no room for both you and me, and either you die or I die. And
Right.
it's a very, very extreme, sharp position. And you're going into something that's more of a dance, something where there's room for you and me, there's some kind of a connection happening there.
In a way, it's not a dance. A lot of Aikidoists prefer not to use the word opponent or enemy. They feel that it is a dance. I feel that it's a combat without the enemy seriously trying to hurt me. I don't rouse up the feeling of alienation and separation, and I can't learn to overcome it. The key problem is we're hardwired to see as not human. And we have to be able to take that hardwiring and change our behavior and see the other as human and respect them. Now, most Aikidoists do this almost unknowingly as part of the Aikido practice. I'm not an athlete. When I started off, I was a bookworm, and I needed to find ways of making it concrete and explicit for myself. So all of the exercises that I've done through the years to replace the feeling of separation, I've made those very concrete and very modular so that I could work with them. And it turns out it's good for other people as well.
Yeah, so that replacing the wanting, the seeing the other as non-human, and therefore mobilizing all this aggression. And actually what's happening is seeing the other actually as human. So how does it help your fighting?
Well, I can give you an answer in words, but it's like going to a restaurant and eating the menu. It'd be better to actually do it, but we can't do it easily here now. Imagine you're walking down the street, and somebody comes up to you with a knife and threatens you. What's your response? You either collapse and be resigned if you've experienced that you're always helpless, or you brace and get angry if you've experienced that you can use force. But in either case, the body doesn't work well. It's like driving with the brakes on. When you feel happy, friendly, respectful, kind, grounded, and strong, your muscles are free and you can move better. You'll be able to hit them, but you won't want to. I often say that we sometimes have to hit, but we never have to hate.
Yeah, great. So the difference is hit but not hate, because hate will actually hamper the effectiveness of your hitting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in that sense, you're really very much teaching self-regulation.
Uh-huh.
So self-regulation for a lot of people would say, oh, this has to do with emotion, that's the mind, how come, you're focusing on the body, and what does it do?
Well, I focus on the body because I can find it. If a disembodied spook came into my studio for a lesson, I probably wouldn't know which side of the room he was on. But the body I can find. If you define anger as a feeling, as a mental process, I don't really know where you find it or how to catch it or how to change it. But if anger is raising the voice and clenching the fists and tightening the eyes and feeling your breath catch, I know what to do about that. You loosen and ground and center, and you step by step eliminate the physiological actions of anger and aggression, and you don't feel aggressive. A lot of the work that I do that I've done in the last 25 years has been with abuse survivors. I had one woman come to me, and she was angry as hell about what had been done to her, and that was her power source. She wouldn't receive any instruction from a man, not from me. And finally, in desperation, I said, look, I'll give you one punch, you give me one punch. Whoever punches stronger leads the lessons. With black belts in Aikido and Karate, you can imagine who punched stronger. Well, I said to her, I'll teach you to kill with one punch if you want. That she was willing to learn. So I said, the first thing you have to do is relax. Why? I don't want to. Because you can't throw a punch if your muscles are tight. So I took her through a series of things. In the end, she was willing to meditate on loving kindness. Why? Because it opened up her body and she hit harder. I didn't tell her that by the time she finished, she wouldn't want to hit.
That's a beautiful story and a very simple example of how, in a way, that tightness is literally the brakes on the, that prevent you from hitting harder. And I love that paradox that actually the relaxing gives you the capacity to hit harder, but on the other hand, makes you maybe not want to destroy.
Uh-huh. It's not just relaxation in the sense of letting the muscles go. This I can't do verbally. I'd have to show you physically. But if you focus your power in your hip joints, and most people don't even know where the hip joints are. They know where the hip bone is, but the hip joint is not the same. I teach in Germany, and in German, Hüftgelenk refers to the link of the hips. We don't even have a common English word for hip joint. But if you focus your movement and your stability through the hip joints, it gives you a sense of stability and power, which is not against anything. It's a positive feeling of dignity in your body, not a feeling of fighting against. So relaxation plus compassion plus awareness of the space around you plus physiological stability creates an overall state that's an antidote to the fear of fight or fight reflex.
Yeah. So essentially that in fight or flight, we have the millions of years old response that goes for very simple, very basic situations where immediate danger and knee-jerk reaction, which is not adapted to, say, the more subtle manifestations that we have to deal with, or even in battle, let's say that fighters benefit from controlling these impulses, and that's where the martial arts came from.
Uh-huh.
And what you are talking about right now in that exercise is a sense with that different position, with feeling that place in your body, in your hip joint, a different way of standing, that lets you experience a different relationship with your surroundings and a different sense of being yourself.
Right.
Where
exactly.
you're more secure, you feel a sense of power and a sense of dignity, and which is exactly the antidote, the opposite of being small, vulnerable, abused, powerless, and all these terrible things.
Right. What I frequently tell people is power without love is not power, it's brutality. Love without power is ineffective and useless. You need both power and love to function as a human being. And to me, that's not philosophy, it's not theology. It refers to body states, and that's how I access it.
Yes. So what we're talking about, if we were just talking about power and love, it would be abstract and it would be philosophy or theology, but you're relating it to really very specific ways of being through the technology, of paying attention to what our body is doing.
Right.
And so based on that, you have actually developed that embodied peacekeeping.
What I've done is let me tell you where I started. I was a new black belt teaching an Aikido course in San Jose, California. And I noticed that when I grabbed somebody, they looked down at the wrist that I grabbed and lost balance in the direction of that look. So I said, keep your head up, it's heavy. And when you tip your head toward the wrist that I grabbed, you lose balance. So they kept their head up and they still lost balance. I watched and I noticed they were looking down. So I said, don't look down. And they didn't look down and they still lost balance. So I was puzzled and I watched, and finally I realized they were thinking down. So I spent the next 5 years coming into the dojo, the martial arts school, when nobody else was around, walking back and forth on the mat, thinking to the left and watching how it altered my posture, thinking up, thinking diagonally to the right, thinking up to the left and diagonally down to the right. I finally began to realize that we create ourselves physically every moment by intending a relationship to the self and to the space around. And that's not philosophy, but it probably sounds a good deal like it. It's a brief statement of how we aim ourselves out into the world, and that's physical.
Yeah. So actually, while you spent a lot of time doing it, it is actually something that anybody can, to some extent, get a taste for by experimenting with body position, by intentionality, body position, and noticing the connections that there is between both. And actually, the little exercise that you demonstrated a few minutes ago about the way of standing and paying attention to the hip joints is a way of noticing that, bidirectional cause and effect thing between intention and posture.
Yes. What I am fortunate to have as a legacy is 800 years of civil war in Japan. And the martial arts, as in all war arts, always come up with brilliant solutions for killing people better. But in Aikido, the man who created Aikido, Morihei Ueshiba, in the early part of the last century, realized that what we needed was a martial art that was about togetherness, not killing and alienation. What I've done is to take it and make it explicit, modular, chunked down so even I can understand the pieces. The talented folks don't need it chunked down. They just look at it and do it. the rest of us need a more explicit teaching process.
Yeah, yeah. But so it's explicit in terms of steps, but there's also something that is a sense of capturing the felt sense
Yes.
of one place and not. It's not just like a mechanical how-to.
Right. The felt sense, as I understand Jen-Lin's work, is very much part of my work, coming from a very different direction. One of the things that I work with, I call following the body. Somebody might come in and say, my brother did this, and I felt such and such. And I'll say, what do you feel when you talk about your brother? And they'll say, usually surprise, shock, anger, jealousy, some emotion word. I say, no, that's not what you felt. That's the name of what you felt. What you felt is an action in the body, and you named it anger. Tell me where in your body you're doing something which you call anger, and what it is you're doing there. Once they can pin that down, I might say, and does something else change in your body elsewhere when you do that here?
So I want to slow down a little bit, because that's a very, there's a lot in my work that's very similar to what you describe.
Uh-huh.
And I know that, lots of time when you describe this kinds of stuff, people nod and say, yeah, I get it, of course, of course, of course. And then, of course, they come back and you ask a question, what's the emotion? And they, again, name it. So I like very much the way you describe it. You say, somebody tells you, I felt anger, I felt this, I felt that. You say, well, okay, no. This is the name you gave it, okay?
Right.
And so the emotion, and there's the word motion in emotion, there's a movement.
Yes.
This is something where the emotion, it's your body's response, your body-mind, your whole organism responds to a situation where there is an implicit or, explicit movement that's there.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And so very different. And the feeling is your experience of that.
Right. So I'll give you an example. A guy came to me, sent by a therapist, because he was flat as a cornfield. What did you feel when your brother did that? Oh, nothing. What did you feel when your wife did that? Oh, nothing. Finally, in desperation, I don't do this often. In fact, I've done it only once. I pulled a knife on him, and he went, and pulled his arms back, went into shock. I said, what did you feel? He said, nothing. I said, what did you do? He said, nothing. So I poked him gently with the tip, said, what did you do with your eyebrows? Oh, they went up. And I took him on a tour of his body. And at the end, he was able to say, I inhaled and stopped breathing. I pulled my hands back. I raised my eyebrows. I shied away from you. I said, what did you feel? Nothing. I just did those things, but I didn't feel anything. So I went, and I said, what does it look like? He said, it looks like you're scared to death. Are you prepared to say that you did all those motions and there was no emotion, no feeling? 2 weeks later, he came back for his next lesson. He said he was at his therapist, and she said, what did you feel when somebody did something? And he said, nothing. He said, wait a minute. And he went through his body, noticing each action of each body part. And then he dwelt on it. He said, I felt sad. He had learned a mechanical process for discovering what his feeling was. And that was what the therapist wanted.
Yeah. So as in a way, a sense of calibrating,
Yes.
First of noticing the physicality, and two, of calibrating, of saying, oh, this is what is called sadness or fear or anger, as opposed to, say, reading about fear, sadness, and anger in a book. And
Right.
These are just empty words. But
Absolutely.
Here, you're taking the body experience, and from that experience, you're putting a name on it, but it's a name on something that the person has experienced as opposed to something that's simply abstract. And that's
Right.
a bridge between, what language is and what experience is.
Yes. As I understand Jen-Lin's work, am I saying his name right? Is it Jen-Lin?
Yeah.
Okay. He found that by the end of the first session, after a number of years of watching many first sessions, he could tell who would derive benefit from a psychotherapeutic treatment. And what I recall from reading his book, he said those people who referred to their body when they said an emotion name, they would derive benefit from therapy. And those people for whom it was abstract and had no connection to their felt body, they wouldn't. So that's very similar in the body work and in the Aikido that I teach.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. So that, one is that connection to the body, and the other is actually that connection to that you're already implicitly reacting, and you're connecting to it, and so you're connecting to the movement. And completing movement.
Completing movement is very interesting. I'm not a therapist. I don't see people with mental illness. I see people who lack resources. So, for example, many years ago I had a nurse come to me for back problems. And as I watched her move, I noticed that every time she turned to the right, when she had to pick up something on the right or move something on the right, she tensed her back, but she didn't do when she moved to pick up something on the left. So I would never tell somebody something. I set up movement experiments in which they learn how to notice for themselves. When she noticed that, I said, "Why do you do that?" And she said, "Oh, now I understand. My ex-husband came at me from the right with a crowbar, knocked me down, and raped me. So every time she turned to the right, she replayed her powerlessness. What I did was take her out on the practice mat, teach her the self-defense against somebody striking with a crowbar. Then when she turned to the right, she didn't feel helpless anymore, and she stopped straining her back." Unfinished business is usually lack of resources, or being too young to do anything effective.
Yeah, and so you revisit that, and actually you're now able, one is to see the threat, and two is to have an appropriate response to it, and then in a way, then it's no longer something that was so overwhelming that it couldn't be digested and stayed undigested, but then you can complete it.
Right. When you gain resources in the present, you don't change the past. You change your relationship to the past.
Yeah. So a lot of your work is about that sense of empowering people, but you also have a vision of it being something that could lead to a more sustainable world.
Yes. Sustainable in a few senses. One, if we realize that we have to be kind and connected to our enemies, and if we respond not with alienation and aggression, but with kindness and on the basis of strength, we can start talking to the people with whom we have been exchanging bombs. The other sense in which it leads to a sustainable world, if you don't feel yourself as a physiological being on the face of the planet, you will be alienated from the other beings and willing to trash the environment and not even think that you're doing that. It's like sitting on a tree limb, cutting the tree limb out from underneath of you and not noticing it. If you're aware, you'll notice that you shouldn't cut off the limb you're sitting on. But people need to have enough inner strength at this point to confront the terror of what we're doing to the planet. Without that, they'll just buy more things and watch more TV because they can't bear to face what we're doing.
So it's an interesting choice of word as you talk about confronting the terror of what we're doing to our planet. And from the terror comes actually the dissociation and the overwhelm, which prevents us from finding effective solution. So very much as you described as an individual level, what it's about is how to deal with terror in order to regain power.
No, regaining power in order to deal with terror.
And vice versa.
And vice versa, yes.
And of course, this being not done in a sense of power like the mad scientist, crazy power, but a power that is based on love, compassion, of self and others.
Absolutely. We say in English, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The search for power is a search for purification. And if you ever find absolute power, you must be absolutely pure, because otherwise it won't be power, it'll be brutality, and it will destroy you and everything else. But the problem is, people have not been exposed to this model of power. Everything that they see in the movies, on TV, in their families, power is hurtfulness. And hurtfulness is hurtful. But I think real power is kind and protective. But again, that's not philosophy. You have to be able to do it. If you can't do it, it doesn't help to say it.
So really, maybe that's a place where we can maybe use that as a note to suggest to people the sense of not just in a way taking it as an abstract principle, but to look for, to experiment, to practice with a position of feeling yourself with that kind of power where you feel safe, you feel secure, you feel in harmony, you feel benevolent, and you feel powerful. It's not the opposition between power versus meek, love and powerless, just all of these, but to embody it, to live in it, and to seek it for yourself. And to notice how, and that's where we talk about technology, how paying attention to your body, paying attention to your intentionality, paying attention to how you relate to things, helps you be in that place and see how much better life can be from that place.
Let's try another exercise. As you stand, as the listeners stand, feel your skin. You've got skin all over you. Imagine you were glowing like a firefly or like a light bulb. Glow out into the world. Instead of shrinking or pulling in or collapsing or compressing, glow out into the world. And then walk around. How does that feel? Most people will feel more present and more relaxed and more grounded by radiating their attention, their intention and attention outward. Add to that glow a feeling of something that makes your heart smile. So whatever it is that a friend, a lover, a pet, a piece of music, a sunset, glow that warmth, of heartfelt warmth. Glow that out. And now imagine walking up to somebody who is violent and being able to glow and radiate kindness. It's a totally different place in which to confront the problem, whatever the problem might be. We in Aikido use attackers as symbols of all the other problems in our life. I don't use Aikido for fighting, but it's a great symbol when somebody comes up to you with a stick and tries to hit you in the head. It gives you the opportunity to not be normal, to learn to be better.
Not to be normal, but learn to be better. So the validating of how the other response is so normal. And what we're simply trying to do is actually to improve on that.
Yes. It's okay if you live in a small group of 20 in the middle of the forest and you chance upon another small group and you kill them because they're not human. But at this point in our planet, if we do that to millions of people at a time, we're not going to last very long. I have a 10-month-old granddaughter, and I want her to be able to grow up. So that's why I'm working so hard to simplify and spread these tools that have taken me 20, 30 years to learn, 40 years. But they don't need to take that long if they're taught efficiently.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Serge.
This is part of the Active Pause podcast at activepause.com.
And now imagine walking up to somebody who is violent and being able to glow and radiate kindness. It's a totally different place in which to confront the problem, whatever the problem might be. We in Aikido use attackers as symbols of all the other problems in our life. I don't use Aikido for fighting, but it's a great symbol when somebody comes up to you with a stick and tries to hit you in the head. It gives you the opportunity to not be normal, to learn to be better.
Not to be normal, but learn to be better.
Uh-huh.
So the validating of how the other response is so normal. And
Yes.
what we're simply trying to do is actually to improve on that.
Yes. It's okay if you live in a small group of 20 in the middle of the forest and you chance upon another small group and you kill them because they're not human. But at this point in our planet, if we do that to millions of people at a time, we're not going to last very long. I have a 10-month-old granddaughter, and I want her to be able to grow up. So that's why I'm working so hard to simplify and spread these tools that have taken me 20, 30 years to learn, 40 years. But they don't need to take that long if they're taught efficiently.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Serge.
This is part of the Active Pause podcast at activepause.com.